I don't remember exactly when the question first took hold. Maybe it was the first time I stared at the stars long enough to feel small. Or maybe it was later, when I watched a news clip about the Pentagon confirming footage of something they couldn't explain. Unidentified. Fast. Beyond what we can build. Beyond what we can even track. It was a quiet kind of question. Not the kind you say out loud. More like a whisper that lingers behind your everyday thoughts. A simple what if. What if they're already here? I know how it sounds. I really do. Most people hear the word alien and immediately think of green men, Hollywood spaceships, or supermarket tabloids. But that's not the kind of question I'm asking. This isn't about flashy flying saucers or laser battles. It's about the strange patterns that thread through history. The shared myths across ancient civilizations. The sightings no one can explain. The testimonies from pilots, scientists, and even government officials. People with everything to lose and nothing to gain by speaking up. This is a different kind of alien story. And maybe it's not even a story. Maybe it's a clue. I remember the first time I watched that Navy footage, the one from 2020. You might have seen it too. Grainy, infrared footage of a small, darting object. A pilot says, "Look at that thing," as it rotates mid-air, apparently without propulsion. It moves like nothing from Earth. I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. It wasn't the shock of, "Oh no, aliens," but the deeper tremor of maybe we're not alone, and maybe we never were. Because that's the part they don't show in the headlines. That wasn't the first video. It wasn't the first sighting. These reports go back decades, centuries, millennia, if you're willing to look outside the lines of conventional history. Let's start closer to home. In 1980, deep in the woods of Suffolk, England, something happened. It's called the Rendlesham Forest Incident. U.S. military personnel stationed at a nearby base reported seeing strange lights in the forest. Some thought it was a crash. They went to investigate, and what they found wasn't debris. It was a craft. Metallic. Silent. Resting on tripedal legs. Symbols carved along the hull. Glyphs no one could identify. One officer, Jim Peniston, claims he touched it. Touched it. He said it was warm. Buzzing. Alive in a way machines aren't supposed to be. Afterward, he experienced a sort of download, binary code pouring into his mind. He wrote it all down. Years later, when decoded, the message referenced distant coordinates and something else. Exploration. For planetary advancement. Do I know if that part's true? No. But I know the story hasn't changed in 40 years. What does that say? The Rendlesham incident is just one node in a much larger web. Because long before radar and infrared cameras, there were stories. Strangely consistent stories. The ancient Sumerians believed in beings from the sky, the Anunnaki, who descended from the heavens to teach humans knowledge. They ruled as kings, they said, walked among us. In ancient India, the Mahabharata and Ramayana speak of powerful flying machines called vimanas. Not chariots, machines, described in detail, materials, propulsion, weaponry. Some argue it's metaphor. Maybe, but others see something else. Memory wrapped in myth. Even the Dogon tribe in Mali, West Africa, told stories passed down for generations. Stories of a star called Sirius B, invisible to the naked eye and unknown to modern astronomy until it was confirmed in 1970. How did they know? They said their ancestors came from there. The Namo, they called them, amphibious beings who descended in a great spinning vessel. They brought knowledge, structure, language. People hear stories like that and laugh. But I've learned something. When the same myth repeats across continents, across time, across isolated cultures, maybe it's not myth anymore. Maybe it's a scar or a footprint. Then there's the silence. If contact happened or is happening, why don't we know? Why isn't it front page news? That's the next layer. And it's darker. There have always been shadows at the edge of a UFO conversation. Not just sightings, but suppression. Project Blue Book, the U.S. government's official investigation into UFOs, ran from 1952 to 1969. Over 12,000 reports were cataloged. Most were dismissed, but some were labeled unexplained. Some involved nuclear missile silos suddenly going offline during sightings. And after Blue Book shut down, everything went quiet, or at least quieter. Because the stories didn't stop. They just went underground. Area 51. Roswell. The majestic 12 documents. Whistleblowers from inside intelligence agencies. Are some of these hoaxes? Probably. But all of them? It only takes one to be real for the entire house of cards to fall. Then, in 2023, something strange happened. A man named David Grush, a former intelligence official, stood before Congress and testified, under oath, that the U.S. government was in possession of non-human biologics. Let that sink in. Not extraterrestrial, not alien, just non-human. That phrasing wasn't accidental, and no one stopped him. No red-faced rebuttals. No scandal. Just a shrug. It came and went. We are more afraid of changing our worldview than confronting the unknown. And maybe that's why they haven't fully revealed themselves. Or maybe they have, and we didn't see it. As I record this, I sit beside a window. The stars are out tonight. Clear sky. Quiet. And the question lingers again. What if they're already here? What if they're not hiding in ships, but in stories? In old symbols carved in forgotten temples. In ancient languages that mention sky visitors before we could even build a ladder. In the eyes of someone on the subway who never blinks, never ages, never belongs. What if we've already met them? What if we're too afraid to admit it? I used to think that if aliens came to Earth, we'd know. There'd be a flash in the sky. A ship descending over New York or Tokyo. Something cinematic. But the more I've learned, the more I realize maybe that's not how contact works. Maybe they didn't come crashing down with fanfare. Maybe they arrived quietly, subtly. Or maybe they never needed to arrive at all. What if they've always been here? That idea sounds strange until you start noticing the patterns. Let me tell you about the Men in Black. Not the movie, but the real stories that inspired it. Since the 1950s, people who report UFO sightings have claimed to be visited by strange men in black suits. Always in pairs or threes. Pale skin, flat expressions. Perfectly average, yet distinctly wrong. They ask unsettling questions. They speak in overly formal, robotic tones. They threaten without threatening. And when they leave, it's as if they were never there at all. One witness said it felt like they weren't people, but something wearing the idea of a person, like a costume, like a shadow playing human. Is that just paranoia? Or is it something else? Then, there's the Valiant Thor story. It's lesser known, but oddly persistent. In 1957, a man allegedly appeared at the Pentagon. He claimed to be from Venus. He was calm, intelligent, fluent in multiple languages. He looked human, too human. No fingerprints. No documented origin. No identification, yet he was granted meetings with top officials. They say he stayed for 3 years, trying to offer humanity a path away from nuclear self-destruction. Then he left. That's the story, anyway. There are photos, government memos, and, of course, debate about whether it ever really happened. But what intrigues me isn't whether it's true. It's that the story exists at all. It's how many like it exist, repeating the same motifs. The visitor looks human, acts human, but isn't human. They come with warnings, offers, observations, and then they disappear, like scientists collecting data on a wild species that hasn't yet noticed it's being studied. This isn't just folklore or fringe theory. Even Carl Jung, the famed psychologist, once said that UFOs might represent a modern myth, an archetype, a symbol erupting from the collective unconscious. But what if it's not just symbol? What if the myth exists because the experience is real? Or rather, what if it's both? Maybe we process contact as myth because that's the only framework we have. Our minds need story to make sense of the impossible. So when we meet something beyond ourselves, we give it wings. Halos, skins of gods or monsters. Or maybe we forget it entirely. Think about how much we forget in a day. Now, imagine encountering something that wants to be forgotten, something that can touch your mind, bend memory, blur perception like mist on glass. There are entire threads of witness reports that say the same thing. It didn't feel like a dream, but it fades like one. I remember the light, but not what happened after. I woke up in my bed, but I don't remember going home. If aliens are real, and if they've interacted with us, even rarely, then they've likely mastered concealment far beyond our understanding. Not cloaking devices, not invisibility, just being indistinguishable from everything else. The ultimate camouflage isn't hiding in darkness. It's blending into the light. Sometimes I walk through cities and watch crowds move. Thousands of faces, most in their own world. Some glued to their phones, some staring off, detached. I wonder, if a non-human intelligence wanted to observe us, how would we even know? They wouldn't need to land ships. They'd sit in cafes, ride the subway, attend lectures. Maybe they'd work in research labs, study psychology, learn what drives us, what breaks us. Maybe they're not here to invade. Maybe they're here to understand. And maybe the greatest act of understanding is watching without interfering. Or maybe they're interfering in ways we can't even see. Let's go deeper. The ancient Gnostics once believed this world was created by false gods, archons, who trap souls in a loop of illusion. They described beings who manipulated perception, controlled the narrative, dressed in false forms. Sound familiar? In modern UFO lore, some describe screen memories, experiences where abductees remember owls, deer, or friendly strangers, only to later discover those were mental projections, masking something else entirely, something that didn't want to be seen as it truly was. Are these just hallucinations? Psychological coping mechanisms? Or are they the footprints of something that lives just outside our field of view? Close enough to touch us, but not close enough to be held? What if this is the reason disclosure has never truly happened? Not because governments are evil, not because aliens are hostile, but because our minds aren't ready. Because truth isn't always light and freedom. Sometimes truth is disorientation. Sometimes it breaks the story we're built upon. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that not only are we not alone, but that we're not even the dominant species on this planet. That we're being monitored, cataloged, maybe even manipulated. Would society survive that? Would you? Or would we fall apart, like a dreamer forced to wake too fast? That's the paradox of belief. It's not just about facts. It's about frameworks. The facts can be right in front of you. Eyewitness accounts, radar confirmation, declassified memos, and still we look away. Because belief is not a switch. It's a scaffold. And for most people, pulling even one beam threatens the whole structure. So we mock. We minimize. We say, well, if aliens were real, they'd make themselves known. But what if they already have? Just not in the way we expected. I can't say I know the truth, but I've gathered enough puzzle pieces to know something doesn't add up. Too many coincidences, too many stories, too many unexplained visitors who seem just a little too practiced. And when you combine that with myths that span oceans and centuries, all pointing to beings from the stars, it starts to feel less like fiction and more like a story we've been trying to forget. Or maybe, just maybe, a story we're being gently encouraged not to remember. I've started to see the world differently. Not in some dramatic, mind-blown, tinfoil hat kind of way, but slowly, quietly, the way your eyes adjust in the dark. You begin to see outlines where you thought there was only black. Shapes emerge. Patterns connect. Not proof, just presence. Take Earth itself. Our planet is ancient, mysterious, and layered with civilizations we barely understand. We think of history as a clean timeline, stone tools, pyramids, Rome, rockets, but the deeper we dig, the more we find strange anomalies, megalithic structures built with techniques we can't replicate, aligned perfectly to celestial bodies. Structures like Göbekli Tepe, built 11,000 years ago, before cities, before agriculture. How? Why? Some say it was just early religion, a primitive attempt to connect with the stars. But I wonder, what if they weren't just looking up? What if they were remembering something that came down? I used to think that if something truly strange existed, science would have found it. But science, like any tool, can only work within the questions it allows itself to ask. And sometimes, the most dangerous idea isn't what we see, but what we're trained to ignore. Ask yourself this. If you were born into a world where aliens already existed, quietly, anonymously, How would you ever know? How would you even begin to suspect it? Unless one day, something broke the pattern. It happened to a woman in Nebraska. She was driving late at night, alone, through a stretch of rural highway. No other cars. No lights but her own. She said she saw a craft hovering just above the road, silent, smooth, glowing with a soft orange light. It didn't land. It didn't chase her. It just hovered. She stopped her car, stared, and then something strange happened. She felt calm. Not fear, not shock, just peace. A voice, not spoken aloud, but clear in her mind, said, "We've always been here." She remembers nothing after that. Just waking up in her driveway, hours later. She told no one for years. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she knew no one else would. That phrase stayed with me. We've always been here. It echoes in old myths, in folklore, in the unease we feel in certain places, in the eyes of strangers who feel too still, in dreams that feel like memories, in the quiet moments between thoughts where something vast seems to wait. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe they don't come from out there. Maybe they come from between states of matter, between timelines, between our perceptions. Maybe the reason they're so hard to detect is because they don't obey the rules we think everything must follow, because they were never bound by them to begin with. Sometimes I think about the idea of the zoo hypothesis, the theory that Earth is being observed like a wildlife preserve. Not to interfere, just to watch, like we watch ants or whales. Fascinated, detached, sometimes moved. If that's true, it would mean our civilizations have grown under observation, that our religions, our wars, our inventions, all played out while someone else took notes. Would that change how you live? Would it make you feel small or honored or maybe just curious? Because if we are being watched, then we are not alone, not now, not ever. And somehow, that thought doesn't terrify me. It humbles me. Still, I wonder why we haven't had open contact. Are they waiting for something? Are we? Or maybe this is contact. Not a landing, not a broadcast, but a slow drift. A drip of ideas into dreams. A nudge toward the stars. An impulse to look up and ask, what else is out there? What if the very urge to explore space was planted? An evolutionary breadcrumb meant to lead us home. Or maybe they're just waiting for us to stop fearing the unknown, to stop tearing each other apart long enough to recognize a shared moment of awe. Maybe they'll appear not when we reach their level of technology, but when we reach their level of perspective. And then again, maybe they don't need to appear at all, because maybe the point was never them. Maybe the point is what their possibility does to us. How it softens the ego, expands the mind, forces us to confront the idea that we are not the center, not of the galaxy, not even of our own story. Maybe the real value of wondering whether they're here is that it makes us better at being here, too. So here I am, looking out my window, watching the stars, and I don't know if they're watching back. I don't know if they're living among us quietly, anonymously, guiding, studying, or simply coexisting. But I do know this. The universe is too vast, too strange, too rich with mystery for us to pretend that what we see is all that exists. And if one day I find out they've been here all along, hiding in plain sight, I won't be surprised. I'll just whisper, "Of course you were."